Welcome to Moto-Mecca Monday. Today we are doing a rant, rave, and review of my 2004 Aprilia Futura RST1000. And a question that we're going to try to answer today is how well did Aprilia do competing with the Honda VFR, a motorcycle that this bike was designed directly to compete with in the sport touring market. I would like to make an argument that it did successfully compete, but we're going to look objectively as to whether or not that really was true. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the history of the Futura and what makes it special. Aprilia made this motorcycle from model years 2001 through 2005, so a much shorter run than the Honda VFR that has been in production for many years and continues to be produced to this day. So if we're going to look at production volume and sales numbers, this motorcycle was not even in the same solar system of success as the VFR. I don't feel that detracts from the quality of the bike or the ride, the interestingness of it. This motorcycle is a little bit like riding or driving a Lancia when everyone else is driving a Toyota. So Toyota might have sold more cars, it might get better gas mileage, it might be cheaper and easier to fix, but when it comes to conversations at the gas station or riding satisfaction, or frankly, just making you as a rider feeling special, this motorcycle does that in a way that the VFR is not really likely to do, with no shade to our friends at Honda. This motorcycle does not have an Aprilia powertrain. This motorcycle has a twin-cylinder, water-cooled Rotax engine. So we've got an Italian bike with an Austrian engine and a Showa suspension. So we've got Japan, Austria, and Italy all represented here in this motorcycle. The engine makes about 113 horsepower and about 70 pound-feet of torque, or about 90 newton meters of torque. The torque response on this motorcycle is super linear, so very accessible power. It's a little bit like riding a motorcycle that's powered by a battery. There is torque just about anywhere in the power range. Pulls really nicely. It's an exciting motorcycle to twist the throttle on because there's just such an immediate rush of power. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that it's a twin-cylinder bike. I own only twin-cylinder bikes, so that might tell you something about my preferences. I'm a little bit biased. The engine has a unique gear and chain-driven valve system, which you don't see on a lot of motors. How that changes the riding dynamics, I'm unsure, but certainly is a neat trick architecture. It has 2 spark plugs per cylinder, CDI injection. Again, it is water-cooled. It has this sort of Aprilia take on a slipper clutch that's called the PPC. And what that does is when we downshift this motorcycle and let the clutch out, on a traditional bike without a slipper clutch, you're going to get rear wheel is going to slip, and particularly on these single-sided swing arm bikes, it can make the rear end hop quite a bit and gives a really insecure, kind of unstable feeling when doing that. And certainly for a bike that you might want to take on the track, which this one I'm sure you certainly could, that's not a good thing. So a long time ago, before slipper clutches became standard, this motorcycle had Aprilia's own take on the slipper clutch, and I think it makes for a much more rideable motorcycle. This is the second Aprilia that I've owned. I had a 2001 before this that had about 75,000 miles, 76,000 miles when I sold it. This motorcycle has just a tick under 46,000 miles, and considering its age, that is not a ton of mileage. This motorcycle has a few modifications. So starting at the front, the previous owner of this motorcycle broke one of the original rearview mirrors. Rearview mirrors that sort of look like something off of a futuristic robotic bug. One of the more unique styling notes about the bike are those rearview mirrors. These no longer have it. I think objectively, someone who was not in love with weird Italian styling would certainly prefer these rearview mirrors. These are aftermarket. It really gives the bike a much more contemporary look. They don't stick out as far. They're far more practical, much easier to see things behind you, and they look really nice. I still have the original mirrors, and I've considered having them fixed and put back on the bike, or at least having the set should I ever choose to sell this motorcycle. It's a little bit criminal not to have those originals on here, but these look really nice. There's a phone mount that is mounted to the triple clamp. Holds my iPhone really nicely. He put a USB charger on the bike so you can charge your phone. He also put bar risers on the bike. So I'm right at 6 feet tall, and that little additional 1.5 inches or so of extra lift on the bars makes a huge difference when it comes to comfort. And I don't really feel like it sacrifices much of the sport qualities of the motorcycle. So if I bought another one, I would definitively have the bar risers on there. We've got Brembo gold brakes. Those are stock. Stops the bike really nicely like all Brembos do. The previous owner put on a set of frame sliders, which is a great idea on a motorcycle with plastic parts on the side that you might end up putting this bike over. These are hard to come by. Again, Aprilia did not make a lot of these bikes, so there's not a lot of plastic bits available for them, so we need to be mindful of that. Suspension's fully adjustable, so if you need to make any changes to the front forks or to the rear shock, you know, just a basic open-ended crescent wrench set, and you can make those adjustments as necessary. Let's see, there's a tank guard that the previous owner put on the bike, which is probably in need of replacement. It's getting a little old, but it still works well. Something that's really neat about the look of the bike is this under-seat exhaust, this triangular exhaust. It doesn't look like any other exhaust I've seen. Again, our friends at Honda did the under-seat exhaust, and Aprilia was destined and determined to do the same thing. The exhaust was designed to not heat up the seat, and it does a really terrific job of that. So I have other motorcycles that have under-seat exhaust. I have an 07 Multistrada, Ducati Multistrada, and you can feel the heat coming off those cans. This bike, you cannot. It is heat shielded. There's airflow that gets under there. Does a brilliant job, you would never know. And they did that, one, I think, for styling reasons, and also so that we could fit hard-sided luggage to the bike. I have the hard-sided luggage, but for the purposes of this video, I did not put it on because it sort of obscures the look of the bike. This is the stock seat, and this seat is one of the most comfortable motorcycle seats I have ever ridden. I cannot imagine that a VFR has a more comfortable seat. Nice grippy material, not too grippy. Cushy, not too cushy. Firm, not too firm. Nice and large, so there's no real hot spots. You know, your whole backside gets nice support. It's a really large seat. It's very long, and it's deceptively wide, but boy, it is a comfortable bike. Another really nice touch on this bike is it does have a center stand, which I am a huge fan of. So you get a little bit more room when you store the bike, a little bit more stable than leaning over on its side. You get the wheels lifted up, the rear wheels off the ground, so you don't get a flat spot, which is really nice. I'm really appreciative that they did that. I think more bikes should be fitted with a standard center stand. The controls are fairly standard, so this is not really like riding or unlike riding any other motorcycle that you've been on. One odd exception, and that is that the brights, typically when you push the button, when the button is forward, that is when you're on your low beams, and when you push this button forward, it's high. And for some reason on this motorcycle, it is the opposite. Button forward, low beams, pull the button back towards yourself, and that is the high beams. So that's really the only thing that took a little bit of getting used to. Everything about this motorcycle, from the 6-speed gearbox to how all of the controls work, the brakes, everything is really, really standard. It does have a kickstand light, and it has a starter arrest. So if that kickstand is down, it's going to kill the engine. And it's also not going to allow you to start it, which is a really nice safety feature. Other motorcycles make you guess. And yes, I have been one of those people who has tried to start a motorcycle with the kickstand all the way down or not all the way up. This one at least gives you a warning with a light to remind you that maybe the reason it's not starting is because your kickstand is down. The company that makes the dials for Ducati, a long time ago it was a company called Veglia, and for quite some time, it's been a company called Magneti Marelli. Also the people that make the dials for this motorcycle. You'll see here in some of the B-roll, it is equally kind of futuristic and modern. We've got a big analog tachometer in the middle. We have an analog speedometer and a digital odometer on the left. We have a pie-shaped LCD display fuel gauge. We can get outside temperature, some information about the electronics of the bike. We have a clock, but it's just a very odd styling choice that you'll see that Magneti Marelli made with how these look, and it kind of adds somewhat to the charm of the bike, as it kind of looks like something off of some sort of bizarre future spaceship that came from Italy. So when it comes to styling choices, making bold choices, and being unafraid and unapologetic, you got to hand it to the Italians. They definitely pull that off. So without further ado, let's do some of our rant rave portions of this. So some of the rants about this motorcycle, I think it's a little too heavy. I think they could have trimmed probably 30-40 pounds off this bike. Certainly low speed maneuverability, you feel that. I am not in love with the way that the luggage attaches to the motorcycle. I don't feel that that was particularly well engineered. Using these sort of rubber straps to act as a portion of the system that holds the luggage to the bike, I feel is maybe a little under-engineered. Of course, finding places to work on the bike can be a little tricky for those of you who are not in metropolitan areas. Fortunately, not too far away, we have an Aprilia dealer that will wrench on the bike. Parts can be tricky to find, but that's just what happens when you own a bike of this age. But I think my main complaint with the bike really is just the weight. They made it a little bit too heavy. As far as my raves about the bike, usable power, comfortable with everything that you would want to do. I think, this bike is lacking ABS, which for some people is either a rant or a rave. There were plans to put ABS on this motorcycle, but they stopped making it before those plans ever came to fruition. I'm okay without the ABS pieces. I think often it's just another thing to break. But in the case of this motorcycle, I think it does fine, without it. Gets a lot of eyeballs. I love the styling of the bike. I think the quality was... I don't know that Honda could have done a better job with the quality of the bike, and I think they made a really smart choice to put this Rotax twin power plant in here because it's really, it's really something else. So overall, if I had to rate this bike on a scale of 1 to 10 for what I was looking for, I would give this a solid 8.5. We're going to unpack the question as to whether or not this motorcycle successfully competed with the VFR. For people who have a more gourmet palate for sport touring motorcycles, then I say they definitively outdid our friends at Honda. When it comes to popularity, who's still making the bike and who is not, I think we would have to cede that to our good friends at Honda with a bike that became legendary, whereas this Aprilia RST1000 Futura is more of a quirky footnote in the annals of motorcycle history. That was about the time that I realized that I had left the motorcycle ignition on for entirely too long. So what you did not see as part of this recording was the 5 or 6 different times that we had to stop and start the filming. We had wind issues, we had lighting issues. Because this motorcycle has a lithium-ion battery, it needs a minute or a minute and a half after the ignition's been turned on in order to start. I had turned the ignition on several times and waited, moved the bike, reshot several times, waited. And having the headlight on for that long killed the battery. So today is the day after filming, and we no longer have beautiful sunny weather here in the Pac Northwest. It is cold and rainy outside, and not a super day to shoot a motorcycle starting video. And this video needs to drop tomorrow on Monday. So we're going to cheat, and we're going to show you what this motorcycle sounds like to start up, courtesy of Frank Guest. My motorcycle sounds basically exactly the same as this, so we're going to cheat, use this as our startup sound, as my motorcycle sounds exactly like this one.
Let's see. That is a good piece of Italian machinery right there.
Again, a big thank you to Frank Guest for allowing us to steal part of his video. And something else that's useful here is we can see what the original Rearview Mirrors look like. I had mentioned that the previous owner of my Futura damaged one of them and had to swap them out. Again, I still have them, but they're not on the bike, and one of them's damaged. Certainly one of the really distinct things about the look of this motorcycle are those bizarre rear view mirrors. So those are an example of what the stock ones look like. Thank you so much for joining us for another Moto-Mecca Monday. We hope you learned something, got something useful out of this video. And if you are looking for a really neat motorcycle, we'll start up a lot of conversations, something that's sporty, comfortable, practical, quirky, and powerful, that just makes you feel a little bit more special than riding one of the countless thousands of Honda VFRs that are out there. I really strongly recommend the RST1000 Futura. I love mine, and it's very unlikely that I would be willing to part with it. So, again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on another Moto-Mecca Monday. Keep the shiny side up. Thank you so much.